Hello everyone, this is Praveen. So today we'll be looking at something called observers. Okay, so which is very similar to what we call as a trigger in a relational database. Okay, so this is in the context of HBase. Okay, so before we talk about observers, I will be talking about briefly about NoSQL databases. Okay, so we have been storing the data in a relational databases all the time, right? Like in the relational databases, right? They do follow the CORDS Raven rules, and they are ACID compliant. Okay, atomicity, consistency, isolation, durability. Okay, so these relational databases have been designed more than 25 years back. So at that time, the size of the data was small. So keeping the size of the data into consideration, the relational databases have been designed. But nowadays, right, so we have social data, IoT data, right, machine data, different types of data. The huge amount of data, right? So it's not suitable for storing in a relational database. So that's the reason why we have a new breed of databases called NoSQL databases. So these NoSQL databases can store much more data when compared to a relational database, and they can retrieve the data also faster. Okay. So people are slowly moving from the relational databases to the NoSQL databases. And the way the relational databases are ACID compliant, the NoSQL databases are base compliant. Base compliant. So in the relational databases, right? So we do have MySQL database, Informix, Postgres, DB2, Sybase, right? So there are different relational databases. Similarly, in the NoSQL databases also there are more than 150 plus NoSQL databases. So these 150 plus NoSQL databases, they have been categorized into these types. So we have the key value database, the columnar database, the document database, and the graph database. Okay, so these are the four categories. Okay, so for the key value database, we have Dynamo, React, Cumulo. For the columnar databases, we have HBase and Cassandra. And for the document, we have Mongo and Couch. And for graph, we have Flock and Neo4j. So as I said, right, like there are lot many databases, but these are the popular ones. Okay. So if someone asks you what a Mongo database is, so you can say Mongo database is a NoSQL database of document type. Similarly, if someone asks you what is Cassandra, so you can say Cassandra is a NoSQL database of columnar type. So today, like we'll be looking at Observer, which is a feature in the HBase NoSQL database. Observer. Okay. So, like in the HBase, right? Like what we have is a coprocessors. So there are two types of coprocessors. Okay, so one is called Observer, and the other one is called a endpoint. The Observer is very similar to a trigger, and the endpoint is very similar to a store procedure in a relational database. Okay. So what's the difference between a trigger and a store procedure? Okay, a trigger, right? Like it gets invoked automatically. So let's say, like I write a trigger, it gets invoked automatically when we create a table, drop a table, right? Or when we put some data, we modify some data. Okay. So basically, trigger is a function. Okay, so let's call it function, and then it will have some logic. It will invoke automatically. Endpoint also have, right? Like it's a sort of a function with some logic in it. But the difference is we have to explicitly call it. Like it won't be called automatically. So it should be called explicitly. So we have to call it. That's what I mean by explicitly. We have to call it manually. It's not automatic. Okay. So observer is very similar to a trigger, and a endpoint is very similar to a store procedure in a relational databases. So triggers and store procedures are very common in relational databases, and like we use PLSQL to write triggers and store procedures. Okay, and in HBase we have observers and co-process endpoints. So here we don't write it in PLSQL, we write it in Java. Okay, both the observers and the endpoints. Okay. So today, right, like we'll be looking at observers in a bit more detail, and then we'll see the same thing in practice. Once again, I say that like the observers are very similar to triggers. Okay. So there are different types of observers. So one is called the region observer, and the other one is called the master observer. The region observer is all for the DDL operations, sorry, DML operations, data manipulation language operations, and the master observer is for the DDL operations, data definition. Okay, so whenever we put some data, get some data, or we scan some data, right, like we use the region observer. And similarly, whenever we create a table, drop a table, alter a table, right, so we use the master observer. Okay. So so today, right, like what we'll do is like we'll look at the get operation in the region observer. So in HBase, right, like whenever we do a get of the data, the first step is called pre-get. The pre-get function is called, and then the get function is called. Okay, so then the post get is called. Okay, so this is what happens whenever we do get in HBase. Okay, so the first the pre-get is called, then the get is called, and the post get is called. Okay, so the pre-get, right, like it is empty, and here is the logic, actual logic for the get operation. Okay, and then in the post get again it is empty. Okay, so whenever we do a get, like the pre-get which is empty is called, then the get is called, which where the actual logic for the get operation is there, and the post get is called, which is empty. Okay, so what we can do is we can simply replace the pre-get or the post-get method. Okay, so here I can replace this with some auditing logic. Okay, or like whenever like I can replace the pre-get with a logic for notifying some external application. Okay, so let's say I replace the pre-get method with a auditing logic. So what will happen is like whenever we do a get, the pre-get will be called where the auditing will be happen. What I mean by auditing is like I want to monitor who is accessing the database, what time, and so on. Okay, so then the actual get will be called where the get happens, and then the post get, right, where which is empty, nothing happens. Okay, so this is the logic. Similarly, we have got methods for pre-put. Similarly, whenever we create a table, right, so the first pre-create table is called, again this is empty. Okay, then the create table is called, where the actual logic is there for the get of create table operation, actual logic for the create, and the post create table is called, which is again empty. Post create, okay, empty. So simply we can replace the logic for the pre-create or the post-create methods. Okay, so here what I can do is, so I can replace the in the pre-create, I'll replace the entry logic with notifying the administrator. Okay, to be a bit more specific, I will say notify the database admin. Okay, so whenever we create a table, the pre-create method is called, right? So the administrator is notified, so he will be sent an SMS or an email or whatever we choose the means of notification. Okay, so here as I mentioned, right, so we need to write a program in Java. Okay, so what we'll be doing is like we will write a class. Okay, I'll call it my observer. Okay, and then like we need to extend the HBase classes. So here like we will be overwriting the pre-get method, which is a type of DML. So we need to extend the region observer. So we'll extend the region observer. Okay, and then like we have to implement the pre-get method. Okay, with our own logic. Okay, and then like whenever we do a get operation, the pre-get method will be called and our logic will be executed. Okay, so we can have whatever logic we want to, but the most easiest way is to write a print statement here. Okay, so the print statement will be called and this print message can be seen in the log files. Okay, so this is brief about the observers. Okay, so we'll see the same thing in practice. Okay, so here right, like what I have done is I have created a VM to get started with the big data very easily. Okay, so VM for virtual machine. So let's say this is your laptop. You can have Windows or Mac or Linux on top of it. And then we need to install a software called Oracle VirtualBox. So which is a free software from Oracle. So on top of it, like I have installed Ubuntu operating system. Okay, so on top of it, like we have the different big data softwares like Hadoop 1, Hadoop 2, Hadoop Pig, and so on. Hadoop Pig, HBase, Cassandra. Okay, so there are close to 20 different softwares installed on the Ubuntu. Okay. So what I have done is like I have packaged this and then created a VDA file, virtual desktop image, and I have uploaded it to Dropbox. So once you enroll to the course, like we'll be giving the access to this virtual machine. Okay. So this virtual machine has already the Ubuntu operating system and the different softwares already installed and configured. Okay, so you don't need to worry about okay, how do I install Hive, how do I configure HBase, how do I where do I get Ubuntu and then install it. Okay, so it's all pre-configured, installed, and so on. Okay, so this way, right? Like you can be productive from day one. So there's no expiry time. All of these softwares, right? Like there are free and open source. There's no expiry time. You can use them as long as you want to. So here, let me start the virtual box. Okay, so here I'm starting the VM. So depending upon the configuration of the machine, like it will take a couple of minutes to start the VM. Okay, so this is how the Ubuntu virtual machine looks like. Okay. So it's very similar to Windows. So this is called Nautilus. I can map it to Windows Explorer. Okay, so where we can browse the files, folders, create them, and so on. So if you go to the installations folder, so if you see, like there are close to 15 different softwares already installed and configured. Okay. So let's see the sequence of steps. So to get started with the HBase, so first we need to start format and start HDFS. Okay. So let me do that. I will open a terminal which is very similar to a command prompt. Okay. So I'll go to the Hadoop folder and then format it. So these commands might be new to you, but these commands have been documented and then they will be shared with each one of you. Okay, so next we need to format it. So this is the command to format it. Bin Hadoop name node hyphen format. Okay, so Hadoop has been formatted. So now let's start Hadoop. So the command to start Hadoop is bin start dfs. So now it will start the Hadoop related process. So how do I verify whether the Hadoop has started properly or not? There's a command called JPS. Okay, so here it has started the Hadoop related process called name node, data node, and secondary name node. So the next step is to start HBase. Okay. So I will go to the HBase folder, say simply cd $HBase. The command to start HBase is bin start HBase. Again, we can run the JPS command to make sure that the HBase process are running. So here we see the HBase master, the quorum peer, and the region server. These are the process related to HBase. Okay. So now we have started both HBase and Hadoop. Okay. So now let me show you the code observer code. Okay. So I have written the observer code in Eclipse. So here is the quick launcher for Eclipse. Okay. I'm simply selecting the default workspace. Okay. So here we will see the code for the observer. So here there's a project called coprocessor. So if you go to the SRC, we'll have all the Java code. And this is the example for the observer. Okay. So let's open it. So here I have named the class as region observer example, and then I'm extending the base region observer. Okay, and then I have implemented the pre-get method. Okay, now whenever we do a get on the HBase, the pre-get method will be called, and the logic here will be executed. So in this logic, what I'm doing is like I'm executing a fake row into the results. So normally, whenever we create a table and we do a get on the table, okay, get on the table, so it will say no rows because we haven't inserted any data into the table. Okay, now here what I'm doing is like I'm inserting some fake rows. Okay, so in the pre-get method, now I'm inserting some fake rows in the result. Okay, fake rows into the result. Okay, now when we do a get on the HBase, the pre-get method will be called and it will insert some fake rows into the result. Okay, so that's what we'll see. Okay, it's a very hypothetical scenario, but like we can have much more complicated logic in the pre-get or whatever method you want to. So this is the logic. Okay, so once we write the Java code, like we need to prepare a jar file. So let me show you how to prepare a jar file, which I have already prepared. So right click on the project, say export, and then select the jar file as the option. Next, select the project which you want to create a jar file, and then here you need to specify the jar file path. Okay, so I have already created the jar file. Let me show you where it is. Go to the HBase folder, lib coprocessor. Okay, so this is the jar file which I created. Okay. So if I open the jar file, okay, so this has the compiled Java class. Okay. So now once we create a jar file, we need to register the jar file. Okay, if you take the case of any operating system, right? So there will be hundreds of jar files. So how will the system know which is the jar file of our interest? So we need to register the jar file. To register the jar file, we have to modify the hbase env.sh in the conf folder. So here if you see in the HBase class path, I have specified the coprocessor jar path. Okay, so this will register the jar file. Okay. The next step is we need to register the coprocessor itself. So for this we have to modify the HBase site.xml. Okay. So in the HBase site.xml here I specify the complete path of the class, okay, including the package. So this will register the coprocessor. Like when you want to register multiple coprocessors or observers, you need to comma separate them. So as I said, right, like in the case of the observers, which are very similar to triggers, so we don't need to manually invoke it. Okay, so it will be invoked automatically. So what we have done is we have implemented a pre-get method, and the pre-get method will be automatically called when we do a get on the HBase, okay, where we are inserting a fake row. So now let's connect to HBase, and then we will create a table, and then we'll do a get operation. So for connecting to HBase, we need to start the HBase shell. So this is the command. Okay, now we are connected to the HBase. This is the HBase prompt, and we should be able to run the different commands like creating a table, dropping a table, getting the data, scanning the data, altering the table, and so on. Okay. So let's create a table called test table. So we haven't inserted any data into the table. So if I do a get operation, usually we will be getting 0 rows. Okay. Now, since we have overwritten the pre-get method with adding some results to the result, adding some fake rows to the result, we'll be getting some data back. Okay. Now, this is how we do the get operation. So when I do a get operation, if you see, like I got a fake row back. Right? So we can have very complicated logic. So as I said, right, like here we can simply replace the logic for inserting the fake rows with some sort of auditing. Okay. So what I can do is I can populate it another table, or I can write to the log file. Okay, so whenever someone does a get, the pre-get method will be called, and then we can log who accessed at what time, what is the table which they accessed, what row, and so on. So that like later, if you want to do the auditing, we can check the log file, or we can check the database to figure out who accessed a particular table at what time and what rows and so on. Okay. So this is about coprocessors. So as I said, right, like this VM will help you to get started with the different softwares. It's already like if you see Cassandra, Hadoop 1, Hadoop 2, HBase, Hive, Pig, Zookeeper, Uzi, Plume, close to 15 different softwares have been already installed and configured. So you don't need to worry about how to install them, how to configure them, and so on. Okay, so this will help you to get started with big data very easily. So this is a brief introduction about observers in HBase. Okay. So hope you had a nice time. Thanks a lot for watching the demo. Bye.